Hi, welcome to AP Crash Course Literature. Today we'll be looking at Sinclair Lewis's 1922 bestseller, Babbitt, which features the unlikely hero George F. Babbitt. Almost all of Lewis's novels have political messages. It's worth noting that while going to Yale, he briefly took a break to work at a New Jersey socialist colony led by Upton Sinclair. Sinclair Lewis met popular success first in 1920 with the satirical novel Main Street, which commented on the dullness of life in small-town America. In Babbitt, he set his sights on a slightly larger target, mid-sized cities. The novel is set in the unquestionably virtuous, successful, and above all conforming city of Zenith, in which the towers aspired above the morning mist, austere towers of steel and cement and limestone, sturdy as cliffs and delicate as silver rods. They were neither citadels nor churches, but frankly and beautifully, office buildings.
Ooh, Mr. Ellis, Mr. Ellis. What's so beautiful about office buildings? Are they even considered architecture?
So, Mensch, I see you haven't read up on art history lately. There's a term for the boring style of office buildings. It's called the international style. It's based on the philosophy of removing unnecessary decoration and emphasizing rectilinear forms.
Wasn't the international style only introduced in the 1930s?
What, you think a city with the name of Zenith would wait for the style to be introduced? When it came to uniform and unimaginative design, Zenith's architects, some of the best, hardest working men anywhere in the country, not too highbrow though, were decades ahead of their time. It's just as I always say, those highbrow, overeducated socialists in Europe always overthink things. If you want some good common sense, you need to leave it up to those virtuous, honest, ordinary fellows.
I'm just a little bit caught in the middle. Life is a maze and love is a riddle. I don't know where to go, can't do it alone. I've tried and I don't know why.
The first chapter of the book is A Day in the Life of George Follansbee Babbitt. Babbitt is introduced as conservative and materialistic. He takes out his irritation for everyday inconveniences by blaming everything but himself.
This is taken to the extreme when he blames his own bath supplies for his idleness. He patted the water, and the reflected light capsized and leaped and volleyed. He was content and childish. He played. However, Babbitt is a businesslike man who doesn't take any nonsense and won't allow himself this relaxation. He also won't take any responsibility for the lapse himself. He roused himself and spoke gruffly to his bath things. "Come here, you've done enough fooling," he reproved the treacherous soap, and defied the scratchy nail brush with, "Oh, you would you?"
Many of Babbitt's criticisms of his wife, Myra, make little more sense than his outburst at the soap and the nail brush. She is adapted to living with him, but it is not clear if they are held together by anything more than inertia and societal convention. Chapter 2 begins with the following observation.
Relieved of Babbitt's grumbling and the soft grunts with which his wife expressed the sympathy she was too experienced to feel and much too experienced not to show, their bedrooms settled instantly into impersonality.
The main point of this is that their bedroom lacks expression, but more striking is the nature of the routine interactions between Babbitt and his wife. He complains constantly, and she pretends to be sympathetic to his irritations. If it seems like there is something lacking there, it is passion, and more importantly, happiness. We find out later that George didn't actually want to marry Myra. When she mistook his companionship for something deeper and trustingly asked when they were getting married, he didn't have the heart to turn her down. This is interesting for a man who appears at first glance to be in control of every aspect of his life. He calculates the cost of the ether he puts into his car's engine each morning. He has bought all the newest appliances for his house, and he owns his own real estate firm. This lack of control is further developed later in the story when Babbitt tries to rebel against the conservative establishment of Zenith. It turns against him and undermines his business, and he eventually realizes that he doesn't have as much freedom as he thought. This theme of delusionment and defeat at the hands of society is also prominent in Lewis's earlier novel, Main Street. As for Babbitt's friends, he has one good, true friend, Paul Rising, and hundreds of superficial club friends. There are several upstanding clubs in Zenith, whose members profess total allegiance to each other and to the higher values of the club, most importantly, adopting the club's common enemies. But in the end, what really matters to them is social standing.
The athletic club is the largest club in the city, and its chief patron is the Conservative Union Club, which all sound members of the Athletic call a rotten, snobbish, dull, expensive old hole you couldn't hire me to join. Statistics show that no member of the Athletic has ever refused election to the union, and of those who are elected, 67% resign from the Athletic and are thereafter heard to say in the drowsy sanctity of the Union Lounge, "The Athletic would be a pretty good hotel, if it were more exclusive."
Babbitt's friends at these clubs are his friends because they agree with him, and they agree with him because they're his friends. If this sounds like rather weak relationships, it's because they are. Babbitt is the kind of guy who keeps his place in society by being agreeable with people, which includes demonstrating that he hates their enemies as much as they do. This becomes a problem, and we'll get to it later.
The club members demonstrate repeatedly that the logic underlying their friendship is really a suspension of logic. This is made clearest here. They voted if their old friend the fat man sold collars, and the price of collars was exactly what it should be, but all of their clothing was tragically too expensive. They admired and loved one another now.
These friends include such colorful characters as Virgil Gunch, Chum Frink, and Charles McKelvey. Babbitt's relationship with each of these men is flawed in a unique way. Virgil Gunch is a raucous roughneck who is boisterous and entertaining around people who agree with him but nasty to those who don't. When Babbitt becomes more liberal, Gunch is the first one to take notice of it and adopts a threatening tone. Chum Frink is viewed as a poetic genius. He writes advertising jingles that his friends assure him are quite clever, but are in reality clumsy and unimaginative. He wishes he had become a real poet, which he revealed to Babbitt while riding around town drunk one night, but has to settle for writing ads for the newspaper. Charles McKelvey is an enormously wealthy contractor who went to college with Babbitt and is in a distinctly higher class than Babbitt. Babbitt admires that his success was achieved, quote, without being any dishonester or buying any more city councils than was necessary. After giving a speech at a real estate convention, Babbitt gains renown as an orator and gives several speeches in favor of the conservative candidate Lucas Prout for mayor. These speeches are covered by the local newspaper and give him an opportunity to rub elbows with men of the upper crust, like Charles McKelvey. At the university class dinner, he convinces McKelvey to come to the Babbitt's house for dinner. Converting fame into social advancement is more complicated than one would think, though, and that brings us to the thought bubble.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have an emergency thought for food update.
There are a couple of themes at play when the McKelveys come to dinner. First, the line, Babbitt hoped that the Doppelbrass would see the McKelveys' limousine and their uniformed chauffeur waiting in front, poses the question whether or not Babbitt really cares about the McKelveys. Most likely, he sees their friendship as more of a social benefit and something to show off, in a sense. This emphasizes Lewis's criticism of superficial friendships in the 1920s middle and upper class. During the meal, Babbitt restrains himself from, well, being himself. Not only does he want to impress the neighbors by the McKelveys' presence, but he feels the need to impress the McKelveys themselves by hiding behind a mask and trying to imitate and conform to their social mannerisms. In one sense, the dinner goes well. The food is fantastic, they have some lighthearted conversation, and Mr. McKelvey even suggests that the two men have lunch together sometime. However, quote, it was a dinner without a soul, end quote, and Babbitt feels that their conversation was given unwillingly. It appears that the McKelveys were in fact patronizing the Babbitts. Though Myra tries to convince herself that the meal was a very enjoyable one, George later hears her, quote, weeping slowly without hope. This passage critiques both classes, the upper for being so snobbish to those below, and the middle class for striving to gain popularity, recognition, and even self-importance via their upper-class acquaintances. Soon after this dinner, the Babbitts treat the Overbrooks, who are in the lower middle class, in exactly the same way they were treated by the McKelveys. Sinclair Lewis uses this to demonstrate that the criticism is not of the specific characters, but of the broader society.
Paul Riesling, however, is not friends with Babbitt for any advantage in social status. He is Babbitt's best friend, and has been since their college days. Quite often, Babbitt eats lunch alone with Paul. He's more comfortable talking with him than with anyone else at the club. One day, talking about a vague sense of depression, Babbitt says to him, of course, I wouldn't beef about it to the fellows at the Roughnecks table there, but you ever feel that way, Paul? Both Paul and Babbitt feel dissatisfied with their lives, and they only feel comfortable expressing their emotions to each other. Paul especially seems to have issues with depression. Sometimes Paul came over in the evening with his violin, and even Zillah was silent, as the lonely man who had lost his way and forever crept down unfamiliar roads spun out his dark soul in music. To critic George H. Douglas, Lewis's genius lay in this ability to convey that, within the 20th century's social and moral complexities, the great American dream was often nothing but a faint and powerless shadow, consigned to the dark recesses of the mind. To break out of this tedium, Babbitt and Paul decide to go to Maine a week earlier than their wives and kids, to have more time to relax. To Babbitt, the camp in Maine is the epitome of individualism, of escape from society and rigid expectations.
After returning from Maine, Babbitt's life crawls along as before. The monotonous drag of work, the social strain of dinner parties. He's put in charge of increasing Sunday school enrollment for his church, and is quite successful, boosting it from number 4 to number 2 in Zenith. His relationship with his son becomes strained as Ted's grades slip, and he insists that he does not want to go to college. This relationship is strained further when Eunice Littlefield, Ted's love interest, is banned from the Babbitt house following a graduation party of sorts. Shortly before graduation, Babbitt goes to Chicago on business and takes Ted along for the weekend. Things go well and the relationship is somewhat mended. Babbitt feels quite proud of his son, who is becoming like him. Following Ted's departure, Babbitt sees Paul having dinner with a strange woman. When Babbitt accosts Paul in the restaurant, he finds him defensive and indignant. Babbitt goes to great lengths to talk with Paul alone later, and is eager to understand his side of the story. Even so, Paul questions Babbitt's moral righteousness, the first time anyone has ever done so. Babbitt ends up taking it upon himself to provide a cover for Paul and make his life easier. When he returns to Zenith, he confronts Scylla about how she's always getting on Paul, saying that her constant insinuations of adultery will lead to it. He apologizes and promises to just go easier on him. This apparent peace is soon shattered. During the meeting where Babbitt is being elected vice president of the Booster Club, Paul shoots Scylla. Babbitt is willing to perjure himself to help Paul, but both Paul and his lawyer tell Babbitt to stay out of it. Babbitt still has hope for Paul, though. He had, doubtless from some storybook, pictured Paul's trial as a long struggle with bitter arguments, a taut crowd, and sudden and overwhelming new testimony. Actually, the trial had occupied less than 15 minutes, largely filled with the evidence of doctors that Scylla would recover and that Paul must have been temporarily insane. Next day, Paul was sentenced to 3 years in the state penitentiary and taken off quite undramatically, not handcuffed, merely plodding in a tired way beside a cheerful deputy sheriff, and after saying goodbye to him at the station, Babbitt returned to his office and realized that he faced a world which, without Paul, was meaningless.
Without Paul, Babbitt needs other relationships to fill the void in his life. In June, when his wife and Tinka go east to stay with relatives, he is left to think about what he truly wants. The first night alone, he tramps around the house in forlorn and unwanted freedom. Eventually, though, he realizes that he wants to find that fairy child of his dreams. His ensuing search for the perfect woman amounts to cheating on his wife, but he cannot allow himself to follow the same monotonous routine with his wife away. That would essentially be admitting that he didn't want any freedom. As Li Jun pointed out in an analysis of the novel, Babbitt's numb dissatisfaction with his life provokes the reader to ask vital questions about the nature of our society and how individuals are supposed to function in it. Ironically, these are the questions Babbitt is incapable of asking himself. One of his philosophical gems is, "Good Lord, I don't know what rights a man has." Babbitt pursues several women, including Miss McGowan, his secretary, Louetta Swanson, a wife of his friend, Tanis Judique, a widow and a client, and Ida Putiak, a young manicurist. When all these endeavors fail, and Babbitt is resolutely dissatisfied with his life, he secretly travels to the camp in Maine, alone, imagining it as a place of escape from all tedium. However, he finds that the guide is unenthusiastic about the lifestyle he has personally idealized, and he can't stop himself from thinking about Zenith. He returns after only a day in Maine, having realized that merely to run away was folly, because he could never run away from himself. On the train ride back to Zenith, Babbitt knows only one passenger, the socialist lawyer Seneca Doane, whose mayoral campaign he fiercely opposed. Doane reminds Babbitt of his liberal college days, and Babbitt decides that he always thought good fellows should be liberal and broad-minded. This will get him in trouble with his conservative club friends, who expect everyone to hate Seneca Doane. When Mrs. Babbitt goes to stay with her sister, Babbitt forms a relationship with Tanis. As he is drawn deeper into the affair, he falls in with her social group and takes up heavier drinking and increases his smoking. The group is composed of bohemians, and they call themselves the Bunch.
And now it's time for the open letter. An open letter to Bohemia. Bohemia. But we're not going to talk about you. We're going to talk about your adjective. The term Bohemian originally referred to inhabitants of Bohemia before the West started using the word Czech to describe people from the Czech Republic. In Babbitt, the word Bohemian means a socially unconventional person, often involved in the arts. So basically, hipsters. But today, the word has been shortened to boho, and it means whatever happens at Coachella. How did this happen? Basically, the French ruined everything. Once again, someone wrongly guessed where the Romani people came from. Last time it was Egypt, this time it was Bohemia. And as white people are wont to do, they took up the style of dress without acknowledging the struggle behind it, and bada bing, bada boom, it becomes the cool look of SoCal. In conclusion, can everyone learn that the Roma came from northern India? Sincerely, Tatiana.
Babbitt's club friends become suspicious of him when he has kind words for the striking workers and questions Dr. Drew's sermon denouncing them. Virgil Gunch in particular seems to be keeping an eye on him. This culminates in Gunch asking him to join the Good Citizens League, which symbolizes the standards to which everyone must conform. The implication is that anyone not in the league is not a good citizen and can be justifiably shunned. Babbitt initially delays and then rejects the offer outright when Charles McKelvey, Colonel Snow, and Dr. Dilling march into his business and offer him an ultimatum. He admits to himself in that moment that he doesn't know why exactly he is opposed to joining the league. However, at another point, he is able to say quite cogently to Myra,
I know what the League stands for. It stands for the suppression of free speech and free thought and everything else.
Babbitt's courageous, semi-principled stand goes downhill from there. The good fellows all turn against him, shunning him in public and boycotting his business, incidentally proving his earlier point that the League stood for the suppression of free speech and thought. With his political rebellion failing, Babbitt puts an end to his social rebellion as well. He finally stops seeing Tanis and interacting with the bunch, which was more stressful than enjoyable for him. At the same time, his relationship with Myra improves. When she gets appendicitis and has to undergo emergency surgery, Babbitt feels the full force of the guilt he has been ignoring for his various betrayals to her. He sees her once again as part of his own essence. As is so often the case, people come together once they are on the same side in a fight. In this situation, everyone rallies around the Babbitts and wishes Myra good health. Virgil Gunch re-invites Babbitt to the Good Citizens League, and Babbitt heartily accepts. Babbitt's life returns to normal, and he adopts all of his old views once again. When he hears his wife mumbling something about pancakes and maple syrup while under anesthesia, he is in such a good mood that he exclaims,
Think of her talking about maple syrup. By golly, I'm going to go and order 100 gallons of it right from Vermont.
As soon as Babbitt's life is back to normal, Ted drops out of college and elopes with Eunice. Both families are angry, but Babbitt comes to his son's defense. Before, he had pushed Ted to go to college and pursue the career in law that Babbitt himself had abandoned. Now, though, he views not enjoying life as his largest failure, so he passes that dream on to Ted. In a sense, this is the essence of the American dream, envisioning a better life for your children than you had yourself. Though the vision is extremely vague in this case, it demonstrates that the American dream, and life itself, is better thought of through happiness than through wealth and social status.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. That is, if there is one.
I got to let it go and just enjoy the show.